This is my FPV drone, and that is the mountain that we're gonna conquer today. Let's go. Alright, so I am in the beautiful mountains of Uttarakhand where I totally love to fly my long range FPV drone, and I thought I'm also gonna take you with me on this ride today, share everything that I know about flying long range FPV, and share some tips as well, because long range FPV can be daunting and intimidating, especially for beginners. But if you're gonna do everything that I'm gonna tell you in this video and trust your drone, then you will be able to fly long range FPV without much hassle. So let's start the video and stay till the very end, because I'm gonna share certain tips that will help you make your long range FPV experience even safer and better, so you can get your drone back home in one piece. Let's go. Hi, my name is Ayan, and on this channel I make videos about tech, travel, transform, and epitome of everything that helps you achieve and live creative freedom and independence. So if you resonate with any of that, do hit that subscribe button. Now let's talk about long range FPV, and I'm gonna divide this video into three different parts. At the first part, I'm gonna talk about the setup that I am using and why this setup is good for long range FPV. In the second part, I'm gonna show you all the pre-flight check that I do before flying long range FPV and how this will ensure that you will have your drone back successfully after the long range mission in one piece. And in the last part, I'm gonna share all the tips that will make your long range experience even better, safer, and smoother. So let's start with my setup first, and I will explain everything that why I have this setup for long range FPV, why it's suitable, and you can also make your own setup similar to this. So this is my 7-inch long range drone. I have showed it several times on this channel and on Instagram. So basically this is a 7-inch frame by a company called RekonFPV. And why 7-inch frame? Because when you fly long range, you need more endurance, you need more battery, and to mount the bigger battery so you can go as far as possible and come back without losing power, without having your drone drain the entire battery, you need a bigger frame so you can carry this battery. So now talking about battery, I'm using Genong 3300 mAh 90C battery. It's a lithium polymer battery and it's quite beefy, as you can see. This is not really ideal for long range FPV because people really prefer to make their own packs using lithium ion cells. Lithium ion cells will give you the better flight time compared to lithium polymer battery, but for now I'm using lithium polymer batteries and this is giving me good enough time. I am able to fly for around 7 to 10 minutes if I'm just cruising around, and this battery is beefy. It's not lightweight, but my drone can easily carry two of them at the same time because I have really powerful transmission setup here. Talking about the transmission, I have a motor from the same company, RekonFPV. It's 2806.5 1250 kV. I'm gonna add everything that I'm using in this setup in the description below, so if you want similar setup then you can also do that. For the stack, I'm using the vanilla SpeedyBee F405 stack. It's a relatively cheaper stack and a lot of people have asked me if I got any problem with that, but trust me, I have not got any issues with that. The ESC is 50 amp, which in my opinion is okay. You don't have to go beyond 50 amp, especially for this sort of setup. In the front, I'm carrying GoPro 12 Black Edition, which is the latest and the greatest GoPro as I'm recording this video. It's able to capture log footage, which is great for color grading in post-production. And as you can see that this drone can carry everything, a bigger battery. In fact, two of this battery at the same time. If you want really long range, it can carry a full-size GoPro included with the battery. So I haven't made any sort of changes to that GoPro. Now let's talk about the three most critical things that you need to have in your setup in order to fly long range FPV. Starting from the very first, the video transmission system. So if you want to go beyond, you need to have a video transmission system that supports that sort of a distance. You can fly analog, you can fly digital, that doesn't matter as long as you are able to cover the distance that you want to go. So on this setup, I'm currently flying DJI O3, as you can see from here. And for me, DJI O3 has been a phenomenal digital setup. I used to also fly long range FPV on analog, so that doesn't mean that you cannot fly long range FPV on analog. You can totally fly it. In fact, I prefer fly long range on analog because if you break the signal on digital, then it will be clean black screen. But if you break on signal on analog, there are chances that you can punch out and still get the signal back. But that being said, I always fly in the location where DJI O3 gives me really great coverage. So yeah, I'm using DJI O3 as my camera as well. So if you do not want to risk your GoPro, you can also record on DJI O3. The footage is not that great, of course, related to the GoPro, but it's good enough to be used on Instagram and YouTube in my opinion. So now talking about the antennas that I have with the DJI O3. So look at this frame and you can see that there are two different antennas that are peeking out. These are actually long range antennas that are actually peeking out of the battery. So this battery is not obstructing the antenna views, and it is really important in my opinion. There are two types of antenna I'm using. One is by HGLRC long range lollipop antenna, 5.8 GHz of course, and one is this IFlight ExpressLRS Albatross antenna. Both these antennas are really great in my opinion. They are directly connected to my DJI 3 using the UFL connector. The stock antenna that comes with DJI 3 is also very great in my opinion. It will give you good enough range, but it's quite small and it can come in between battery and the frame, so you might lose some video there. So that's why I recommend flying these sort of long range antennas, which actually pokes out and give you a lot of range. Now, the other most important thing that you need to make sure you have in your long range FPV system is a great radio transmission system. So the radio transmission system that you can use for long range FPV is something like ExpressLRS, which I am using. So I'm using ExpressLRS at lower packet rate, at lower data rate, that gives me more range. So you can fly long range FPV on ExpressLRS at 50 Hz, which will give you the maximum range. However, I'm flying it at 250 Hz, which is a good balance of packet rate and also the range as well, especially if you're flying in an open location like this mountains. But if you do not want to fly ExpressLRS, I would highly recommend that you check out a TBS Crossfire, which is a very mature platform and has been in the RC industry for a very, very long time. It's a trusted brand, but my personal preference has always been flying 2.4 GHz, and ExpressLRS is open source. It has a lot of different companies making antennas, making receiver and transmitter, so that's why I use. On the radio / remote controller side, I'm flying my trusty Radiomaster Boxer without any modification, except that I have changed the battery and it's carrying the bigger 6200 mAh battery. Apart from that, I haven't made changes to gimbal, I haven't made changes to the stock antenna, and Radiomaster Boxer is my go-to ExpressLRS radio, so that's why I'm flying it. It's really great, it's really ergonomic for me, and it really provides me a sense of safety when flying long range FPV. Now, as I mentioned, since ExpressLRS is open source, that means a lot of companies can make receivers of it, and not all receivers will be great. But if you want to fly stable long range FPV, you should choose a receiver that has a diversity built into it. It's even better if it has a power amplifier PA and LNA low noise amplifier. But I am flying the receiver called Radiomaster RP3, which has the two different diversity antennas. So when it comes to mounting the antenna, I have mounted one on the back as horizontal position and I have mounted one on the side as vertical position, so it will give me great diversity. And the reason for mounting the RC antenna one in the front is, for example, if you are flying long range FPV and you see on your OSD that you are running out of range for RC controller, the moment you turn back, the antenna will also go back, and if you only have one antenna, then you will lose the range and you will fail safe. That's why it's also important to have one antenna in the front, and I have mounted it in vertical position. I usually fly long range with the antenna of my remote mounting vertically, and this has been in my experiment, has given me a better range. Now for the video side goggles, I'm using this DJI Integra goggles, which has inbuilt battery. I haven't made any modification to it. It comes with stock antenna, everything is stock, and this gives me phenomenal range. I really freaking love this goggles. It's really great to see and admire views on this goggles because it has great high definition screen, especially when you're cruising around the mountains or when you are diving down a cliff. Alright, last but not the least, this particular component is official, but I would highly recommend that if you want to fly long range FPV, then you must put it in your drone, and that is a GPS. So a GPS receiver will get satellite locks and it will know your home position. So there are two different ways that I use GPS. One is to find my home direction back home. So on my OSD, there is an arrow which always points towards the back home direction, and this is important, especially if you're flying in mountains and greeny area where once you have launched your drone, everything looks similar and you do not know where to come back. This arrow really comes handy and you can follow your arrow to back home. The second most important feature of this GPS is you can program return to home feature. So during any time in flight you feel that you are losing control of your drone, you just have to flick a switch on your transmitter and this drone will ideally fly back to the location where you first armed it from. Also, in case of failsafe, if you lose the remote control signal to your drone, this drone will automatically go to return to home mode and it will try to find the home location back and it will come back to your home location ideally. The reason I'm saying ideally because there are no obstacle avoidance sensor. So when the way back, if a drone encounter any sort of wire, any sort of tree, any building, then it will be crashed into it, unfortunately, because there is no obstacle avoidance that you find in DJI drones. So the last point I want to make is you can definitely fly long range with smaller drones like 5-inch, 4-inch, 3-inch or even 2-inch nowadays. The only reason I have chosen 7-inch frame for my long range expedition is number one, I wanted to mount a full size GoPro to get the best quality image possible, and number two, I wanted to mount a bigger battery so I can go further distances. As I mentioned, it's also possible to fly long range with smaller drones like 5" and 4". But in my test, what I have experienced is there is not enough juice for you to go straight up to a cliff and come back, especially if you're flying against the wind, and that I'm going to talk about in pre-flight checks. Alright, now let's talk about some pre-flight check that is really important for the safety of the people around you flying drone and also your drones. So if you really want to enjoy peace of mind while flying long range FPV and get your drone back in one piece, then do hear this very carefully. The very first thing that you need to do before taking off your drone is to have location awareness, and I cannot stress this enough. It is the most important part of your mission. What I mean by location awareness is, for example, I want to go and fly on that cliff and I want to come back. First of all, I need to understand my route. I need to make sure that what route I'm gonna take, and if there is any obstacle on that route. For example, I have discovered that there is a tree and there are some power lines going over there. So as part of my location scouting, when I discovered these things in my path, I'm gonna avoid that. The second thing that you need to do as part of your location awareness is check the direction and the intensity of wind. So as I mentioned that your drone, if you are flying in the direction of wind, it will take less power. So you will reach that destination very quickly, very easily without losing much battery. But you always have to keep in mind that when you are coming and bringing your drone back home, then it will be flying against the wind and it will require more power. And always remember, when you are flying against the wind, you will need more power. So always have some extra power, especially if you're flying in the wind for your mission and you have to fly against the wind when you are coming back home. The third part that you should keep in mind while doing a pre-flight check, especially in the location awareness category, is to make sure that the area that you are flying is not very dense in terms of people. There is not very much obstruction, not much concrete, not much trees. Especially there shouldn't be any military establishment. That places are generally out of the bounds for people to fly drones. And also take a look and make sure that there are not many airplanes flying in that area. If the airport is nearby and the location that you want to fly is a path of air traffic, then definitely must avoid flying in those locations. Talking about the next point in pre-flight check, always make sure that you have a spotter with you. A spotter is a person that can monitor the drone from naked eyes, and it's really important to have a spotter, especially when you're flying FPV. There are times that you will lose a sense of direction and a spotter will always help you. So whenever I'm flying long range FPV, I make sure that I have a person who can act as a spotter for my missions, and this has helped me a lot, having a spotter, especially when I'm flying long range missions. Alright, last but not the least, I want to mention that always check and follow local laws. If you do not have a drone license, if you do not have permit to fly in a particular area, if you do not have a permit to go beyond certain distance, if you do not have a permit to go beyond a certain height, then never break those rules. As a general rule of thumb, whenever you are flying long range FPV, always try to do in a straight line, in a line of sight direction. That way you will always know your way back home, and it will also give you maximum range. If you want to gain some altitude, then make sure when you are having goggles, you point upwards so your antenna face straight towards the drone, and it will give you the maximum range. So this is all about the pre-flight check. So there are two more things that I quickly like to do as part of my pre-flight checks before I put my drone in air for any long range mission, is to have an overall look at my drone, see all my propellers are right, all my motors are doing good, everything is mounted nicely and tightly, the battery is not dangling, there is no lead coming in the propellers, my antennas are straight and they are not wobbly, and my GPS is all mounted as well. One thing that I forgot to mention during my setup video is I also have a self-powered buzzer on my long-range FPV drone. So what it does, for example, if your drone crashes when you're flying a long-range mission, you can check your drone location from latitude and longitude, and when you reach to that location, you can flick a switch on your transmitter and the buzzer will start buzzing. But what happens if your drone crashes and your battery lead comes off? Then the buzzer will not work right. So I have also added a small self-powered buzzer here which has its own battery. So in case a drone is crashed, the battery is ejected, after 1 minute the buzzer will automatically start making sound, making it a little bit easier for me to find my drone. So you can also have this inexpensive self-powered buzzer on your drones. And the last thing that I like to do is have a quick check at the visibility. Make sure that you are not flying in a very dense foggy environment. That will hinder your visibility and you will lose orientation, and there are high chances that you will lose your drone. So that was all about the pre-flight checks. Now let me quickly show you my process of setting the drone, and I'm gonna walk you through everything that I do before putting my drone for a mission, and then we're gonna quickly talk about all the tips. Alright, so this is the location where I want to fly my long-range FPV drone. As you can see that this is a pretty solid location because there are not many obstruction, but you still have to take a lot of things into account. The very first thing that you should look for is the visibility, and if there is a very dense fog, then there are high chances then you will lose your drone and you will lose your orientation. So never fly in low visibility area. Now just doing a general scouting of this location, as you can see there are not much obstruction, but there is this one tree which could come in the way if I'm flying the drone straight in this direction. And if I'm flying long range beyond this tree, then this tree might affect with the overall range. So I'm gonna keep my drone over here because there is no obstruction, and I'll try to go and climb this particular peak and then do a dive coming back to this location. Alright, the next thing, as you can see that I am under a shed, so if I put my drone and launch it from here, it will not get a good GPS lock. For a good GPS lock, you really need your drone to have a lot of satellites, and that means you need a clear sky so it can capture all the satellites. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take my drone, I'm gonna put it down there, and there is no obstruction above, and it will have all the GPS satellite locks because there is no obstruction down there. But then I'm gonna climb up and I'm gonna sit and I'm gonna fly from here because I want to fly at that altitude, and it's really important that I have some sort of upper edge where I can just see my drone flying straight in the line, and this will give me the better range if I'm in the altitude. If I'm flying from down there, I cannot go really above because that will increase the distance. So I'm also gonna put myself on the height, and then I'm gonna climb my drone towards that cliff and come back diving. Let's go. Okay, so as you can see that I have put my drone down there, and there is no obstruction on top, so this drone will get good GPS lock. I'm having the M10 GPS chip on my drone, so it will anyway get satellite locks very quickly. I usually wait for 10 to 12 satellite locks, and that usually gives me a great precision for coming back home. So as a general practice, what I like to do is that is my rendezvous point where I want to go and take my drone for a long range mission. But as soon as I take off, I will not go straight to that point. I will first go in the opposite direction as back as possible, and then I will climb slowly and bring my drone to the front, and I will go to that point. This way I will get the great enough run for my video, and if I want to cut any part, I can do that. So I have heard the beep from the buzzer. That means the satellite lock is done and it's time to put the drone in the air. Let's go. Alright, I am all set. I have already got 14 GPS satellite lock, which is great. I have updated my return to home point, so I'm just gonna arm my drone and I will start flying. Okay, let's take off. 3, 2, 1, and we are in the air. So as I mentioned, what I first like to do is as soon as I put my drone in the air, I first like to just cruise around and see if my signal is breaking anywhere. I will just go behind certain things and I will take my drone as back as possible in the opposite direction, and then I'm gonna go to my rendezvous point where I want to go. So everything looks good here. I have a still solid 50 megabits per second of signal from my DJI 3, which is great. That means there is no breakage. I do see there are a couple of power line wires which I need to avoid, and also this tree which might come in the way if I'm flying back. I do have a clear line of sight to the cliff that I need to fly, so let's go to the very back and I will just start climbing my drone slowly. The visibility is great. There is not much fog. The light looks really good. I hope the video comes out really great. The colors will be amazing. And yeah, I have also started recording on my DJI O3 as a backup recording for my DVR. The latitude and longitude positions are updating as I'm flying my drone, and we are on our way to the rendezvous point. Alright, so the drone has been landed. I'm just gonna bring my drone back and we're gonna continue from where we left. Alright, now let's talk about some tips that I wanted to share that will make your long range FPV journey even more smoother and safer. Starting from the very first, and that is take baby steps and do not rush into long range FPV. What I really mean by that is, as long as you made a long range FPV drone, you do not have to go straight towards a cliff, you do not have to go straight towards the skies. But first of all, take baby step, fly your drone nearby, see if there is any signal breakage, fly around and take small baby step, increase your range little by little. Do not go straight 1 or 2 kilometers at the first time. Maybe first time you go 100 meters, next time you go 200 meters, and then you will slowly build more and more confidence, and then you will be able to go as far beyond as your drone can take you. But this is my first advice to everyone who wants to start with long range FPV is take baby steps and do not rush into it. Number 2 is something that I already mentioned, and that is do not take crazy risks. There is no shot, no video that is worth risking your drone or risking any people or property in the area where you are flying your drone. Number 3 is again respect laws, and that stands true for both laws of nature as well as laws of authority around you. So do not do anything that is illegal, do not cross any boundary that you are not supposed to, do not hinder anyone's privacy, and that is something that you should really keep in mind as a responsible drone pilot. Point number 4 is do not shy to bail out when we are flying a long range mission and we have a rendezvous point in mind. Then if we do not reach that rendezvous point for any sort of reason, maybe it's because of video breakage, maybe it's because of some obstruction, do not hesitate to bail out. If in any situation you feel that you are not in control of your drone, that could happen because of high speed, that could happen you lose your video feed, that could happen you lose your RC feed, just trigger return to home or just disarm, but do not let your drone keep flying like this. It's not safe, it's very risky. So always bail out, come back home. You can always go to that point the other day, but always optimize safety first. And the last tip that I like to share is stay relaxed and stay calm. As I already mentioned, that long range FPV is all about enjoying out of the body experience, explore nature, see the beauty of things around you. You do not have to take videos, you do not have to worry about Instagram likes and followers. All you have to do is enjoy this hobby, which is the beautiful gift that you have given to yourself by partaking in this hobby. And stay relaxed, stay calm, do not get panicked. Trust your drone. If you have done everything right that I have shared in this video, from pre-flight check to post-flight check, and keeping in mind all the tips that I share, then you do not have to worry about anything at all. Just enjoy the nature and enjoy your FPV flight. Alright, that brings us to the very end of this video. I hope you really enjoyed it. I hope you learned something new, and I really hope that you stick around with my channel. Let's connect on Instagram, and if you haven't already, do like this video. And I also like to mention, if you're just getting started on FPV, I have this huge playlist where you can learn everything about FPV, and on this video you can learn all about the beginner's mistake that FPV pilot makes and how you can avoid them. But on that note, thanks for staying to the very end, and I'm gonna see you in the next one.